So,
All right.
topic for today. I entitled the video C# to the moon. So we're going to talk about the rise of C# and I'm not going to call it the fall of Java, but the decline of Java for sure. And I'll show
Yeah.
you it's only part of that. But we'll show you some stats around that. So,
And then we'll
topic
give you our
today-
thoughts on why that's the case too.
Exactly.
Like why we think we don't say this to be like, this really for us isn't like code wars or stack wars or anything like that. Like, Mac versus PC. And
Right.
what we try to do is we try to base our curriculum around what will get you a job and what's the most in-demand thing. And then looking at your career going forward so that when people ask us, what should I learn? We need to give you something. And we think the worst advice in the world is learn whatever you want. Because there's definitely trends that you can look at that can make you more profitable as a developer going forward.
Right. You have to think about it in terms of this isn't learning how to code. We think it in terms of getting a job. So if somebody asks you, which language should I learn to code? The correct answer is it probably doesn't matter because you're only you're learning. It doesn't really matter. You can learn any of them, right? That's the same thing.
Right. Yeah.
But which one of those is going to get you a job? That's a much deeper question. And probably the question you're really asking if you think about it.
Yeah. I want to break into software industry. What should I learn?
Yep.
So, and what we talk about .NET is more of an ecosystem than just a singular language. I mean, obviously the primary language is C#, but like .NET allows you to do a lot of things. But first off, the people that are watching us, let's just talk about the software industry as a whole. So even if you don't listen to us and you learn something else,
right?
What are the prospects out there, Kevin, for software developers? What do you think? We got some stats around this.
We do. So here's how we're going to talk about this today. We're going to show you a whole bunch of different like sources that we've sort of like grabbed from. So this is not just us talking about this. This is other people talking about this stuff too. So first thing we're going to talk about is this right here. This is U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics website. And they put this out every year, and they talk about different jobs, and they talk about all the jobs that are out there. And this particular one, software developers.
Yeah.
And this stat right here is an interesting one. So the job outlook, this was a study that was done 2019. They do these every year, so these do get updated. But 2019, it was 22% growth, expected growth between 2019 and 2029, much faster than average. This is an area that you want to look at. They talk about your median pay too, over $100,000. That's good. Yeah. And the employment change expected within that next 10 years, 316,000 new jobs.
Number of jobs, about 1.5 million in 2019.
Yeah, so it's big. Yeah.
Yeah, another thing that you'll see is even in the 2020 COVID, yes, there are some companies that closed down, but I think .NET, or not .NET, but software development in general had they were less impacted in COVID because you could work remote.
We'll actually talk about that in one of our articles that we're going to talk about a little bit later. It does actually talk about that and the decline in the job market overall. And overall, there is a decline in everything across the board, but there's something good about C# in that whole thing and about .NET developers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and how that worked. And then so like even if you did work for a company that was impacted by COVID and you were a software developer, your prospects for getting a new gig was much stronger than, say, if you're working in hospitality, restaurants, just anything, movie theaters. I mean, like, that where you're having to like switch careers at that point, it's kind of harder to do.
Right.
So
next thing we're going to look at. So overall prospects for software development, good. So
so you absolutely, if you think you're wanting to break into this industry, should I answered a tweet this morning, like or maybe it was a YouTube comment, but like if entry level devs are getting hired, why does everybody want 3.5 years of experience, blah, blah, blah. Don't listen to that type of rhetoric because that is someone that maybe isn't having their own success in the job market. And then they're correlating that to things they see on Indeed or whatever. And that's not, I don't think that's a true correlation. But when you see the numbers, there are open positions, plenty of opportunity, but you do have to know how to code. So I mean, like
Right.
you can't just walk in and get it. So there's a learning process, and that's both good and bad. I mean, like so like a true entry level position where they'll hire you based on, hey, you went to college, you seem like a smart guy, you fit in culturally, you can come over here and take over the Peterman file, or something like that. You like to use their Seinfeld references,
Right.
Where you're just moving paper or you're doing a office job. But like for coding, it's skill based, which is good, which means if you get the skill, then you can get in. So
definitely. Okay.
Definitely learn how to, I think software development is something you should be pursuing. Yeah.
So before we move on, let's talk about our sponsor of the day too, Coldest Water.
Okay,
What's in yours today?
Coldest water, man.
You've straight up water again? Just
water.
Yeah, me too today. No tea in it today. Just straight up cold water. Thank you for the sponsorship. You can get a link down in the description below. You can enter their competition that is still running to win the cool big bad like Coldest water bottle. Yeah, you can also get 10% off using code CF10.
Yeah.
Okay, so today's topic was actually spawned by a message that we got. So so one of our viewers here, I don't know if he's here today actually, Safel, has sent us an article both on LinkedIn, which by the way, if we're not connected on LinkedIn and you want to be professionally connected, connect with us. You can find us on there. We'll definitely accept your connections on there on LinkedIn. If you guys are interested in professionally networking on there, and you should be. Yeah,
I accept most of and then actually also check my messages a lot. I don't answer them all, but I do check them, whereas a lot of people don't.
Right.
So it seems to be one of the social platforms that I'm active on. So much more than say the Discord channel, but like
I'm more active on the Discord channel, which I gave a book away today on the Discord channel. We hit 1,000 users on the Discord channel, so I did give I did give a copy of a book away, which you haven't heard from the person who won yet, but so I did give that away on there, and we'll do more giveaways as we hit more milestones on there and stuff as well.
But connect with me, I'll connect back for sure.
Exactly, and me too. So Safel sent us a link on LinkedIn, and it was a link to this report that I will pull up right here. And this is the report. So Safel's in the UK. He's actually in a part of the world that's close to where I'm from. He's near, I think he's in Solihull, I think I saw, near Birmingham. So this is the report that the UK puts out every year. So they put out this tech report. And you'll see these sometimes for the US too. But what we saw in this report when we looked at it was this part right here.
Yeah. So like if you look at it, like the total number of advertised roles, so they're looking at advertised roles, search terms. And so like that number of Java developer roles actually decreased by 16%.
So this was from 2017, 2018 into 2019. And then the percentage of change of those job roles went from 60,000 down to 50,000. So it lost 10,000 roles and a negative 16%. Whereas .NET developer at the exact opposite. It went from 36 to 39 to 46 in 2019. So a 26% increase.
Yeah, and to be fair, we can look at the bottom one. We can see the C# one, and I'll talk about that one.
We were wondering about this, with a negative 13. So let's say even if you account both of these buckets in together, it's still a net growth of 13%. So it's still a positive, even if you do, and I'm not sure that's what that means, but...
So the first one is, let's just look at Java. Here's what I think is going on in Java, and I could be wrong about this, but the numbers are striking. I mean, like, when you look at it like Java developer going down by 16%, I think that's the transition from Java as the main mobile Android development to Flutter or Kotlin. I think that's where this market is moving over to when they're building Android-only apps. Or you're seeing the adoption of what I think is cross-platform mobile development is pushing Java out because you got three flavors of that. You got Flutter, React Native, and Xamarin. Xamarin being C#, Flutter being Dart. So like I think that's what's going on when you see that. And I think for the longest period of time, Java had been inflated by just doing Android development.
Right, definitely. And here's another part of that same study too. Look, a little bit further down the page, they had this. There's literally a section entitled ".NET Developers in Short Supply,"
right?
Which is another interesting take. So they show .NET Developer. They showed there was almost 4,300 candidates available on the market, yet there were 30,000 job openings in the UK. A ratio of
In the
0.14.
UK. This is
the
just
UK.
the UK,
This is just
Kevin.
the
This
UK.
isn't the US.
No.
And so like in the US it's larger. So like it's amazing like how many people. So this should tell you right away. So like the number of openings versus the number of qualified candidates, .NET is in short supply, which means companies are flocking to the .NET framework and the Microsoft stack to build things, and then they're out there looking for talent to do it. So if you're out there and you're a Java backend developer, you should be able to easily transfer into C# skills. Those languages will be very familiar. Learn the tooling, and you should be real quickly be able to take on some of those .NET roles. So it's going to give you a lot more opportunities to win. Second, when there's a short supply of things and people are coming in the market with lesser than like 1 to 3 years experience, and this is what I was trying to tell the person on Twitter, is just because they say they want 1 to 3 years of experience doesn't mean they can actually find someone with 1 to 3 experience. So you should apply anyway.
Yeah, we often see those dream lists, don't we, with jobs?
Yeah, and so those are job descriptions, and they can come across as hard and fast requirements. But at the same time, man, if you're the only one applying and you can demonstrate some stuff on your portfolio, you're at least going to get a look, and you're at least going to get an interview and your chance to win a role. You know, but you can't apply and say I'll learn .NET when I get there. I mean, I don't think that happens either.
Yeah.
So you have to like do some work of learning how to code specifically C# and .NET, and then apply to those roles with a portfolio of projects that you can demonstrate that you can do it, and then you can win those roles. But in the UK, man, it looks like if you knew .NET, you would have a role.
Yep.
You shouldn't be unemployed if you're
it definitely looks that way.
Every .NET developer is employed.
And this is not the first time we've heard about that in the UK too. When we had the recruiter on from the UK, he said exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
So he said exactly the same thing. He's like, it's all .NET here. So I just want to say, a couple of you guys just connected with me on LinkedIn, and I will be accepting those right after this. I just got the pop-ups on my phone.
Very cool.
Mike and Andre. So yeah, I'll accept those. Thank you. We'll connect there.
So here's the other thing that I think is going on in the study. So like in the first graph where it says C# is declining by 16%. I think what happens is, and this is something unique to Microsoft, is like there's a lot of things, a lot of job descriptions that go around, and they all use C#. So, but they're not really saying, I want a C# developer. That means a lot of things. They're typically saying, I need an ASP.NET full stack developer, which if you're doing that for a living, I would say 95% of that is C#. There may be some old VB legacy code out there, but in general, all new work probably at 100% level is C#. And so like you'll see a lot of these different search terms that fragments that, so that they're being more specific about C# developer, whereas Java is kind of what Java is going to be. When you say Java developer, that means
it kind of gets
mean a full stack role.
I think it's Java does a good job about putting everybody into the same bucket. C#, it's like you got to accumulate 15 different buckets to figure out like what the job market looks like.
I think so. And so like when I see things like ASP.NET on the rise and C# on the fall, that just means they're changing the search term, and you should look at ASP.NET because they use C# to do that.
Right.
I mean, it's not like there's a movement to go back to VB.NET. I mean, like, no.
Right, that's not happening. Here's something N17 Hero says too. Don't believe C#.NET is just for large corporations either. Just about to start a project with an SME that is C#. Yeah, and we know this is true because all of your consulting work, most of which isn't for Fortune 500 companies, is using C#.NET.
In my startup, man, the one that I've bought and sold, was built in .NET.
Yep.
So I started, if you guys don't know my story, but I started something in 2007, and it was in the fraud industry, check fraud. Started a company, built the entire thing on .NET, multiple products, rolled it out to, I don't know, 500 to 700 banks at the time. I don't know how many they have now, way more. And then doing check fraud and credit card fraud. And it went nationwide and made, it does really well, sold it in 2018. All of that's built on .NET.
Yep.
So, like when you're building enterprise grade stuff, .NET makes a lot of sense, especially if you already know how to do that. So you're not going to pick something else because the other language is good for startups. I've never understood that.
Right.
That like thing.
Right. Yeah, that doesn't
Ruby's
make any
good
sense.
for startups. Like
what does that mean?
It's like, really? Why? You can prototype it quickly. Okay, we showed Tuesday that you can prototype a lot of things quickly with Visual Studio.
Plus, that didn't work out so well, did it? Because it went away, it died. It wasn't supported by a big enough company, so it just it moved on, and people moved on.
Yeah. So I think NC-17's right. People are using it in all facets of businesses and all sizes, up and down the enterprise size chain and across verticals. Everything, it's been used everywhere.
Okay, so let's look at the next thing we have here. Let's see. Next article we have to show. Accept those cookies, right? So this is somebody talking about .NET versus Java and which platform is better for your career. This was super interesting. I don't know if this is like it could be bias in the way that I don't know the person that wrote this. I really don't. And it's not on a .NET blog or anything, so I wasn't like But it very heavily talked about Java being old school and and I didn't know about this licensing issue either.
Kevin, I didn't know that either when I read that there's certain parts of the SDK that are licensed, you have to pay for it.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy.
Like Microsoft is definitely free on that regard.
Yeah, this was definitely a pro .NET article, but again, it's one of those things. But the part that I found interesting in here was, what was it? It was a bit further down, I think. So the Unifi Platform, we talked about that a lot here, about how it works across all these different things. It being free, open, cross-platform, all the different applications and things you can build with it. This part was interesting. Yeah, here we go. This was the part that we wanted to talk about here, and how regularly this thing is updated and its future path, which is published from Microsoft.
Right, and you don't see, and I could be wrong, and if you want to correct me, I'm wrong, but I do not see this same type of innovation release schedule with Java. And so like Microsoft is pushing this forward and has a long roadmap for the framework, the languages, and the types of things that they're trying to do. They are being very innovative on not only in the language, which Java is just the language, but also the framework, and then also the targets. So we call them workloads. Like they're innovating on the platform for mobile, microservices, web development, desktop development, and then when you look at their Blazor implementation of WebAssembly, and then just pushing that further from pushing that into WebAssembly running on the cloud or the websites. It also now is going to be with .NET 6 desktop targets, Mac OS and Windows, and so there's a lot of innovation going on behind the scenes to make this the first-class citizen everywhere, and there's a big reason for that. We'll get to that in a second.
Right. Just to answer N17 Hero's question, yes, I'm going to publish all these links down in the description after we're done here. I will make sure they're on the description. So if you come back to it after we're done, I'll make sure I do them right after.
Right.
So you will be able to go check out all these.
But like Kevin's being fair, like when you read it, we don't know the writer of the article, and we didn't cherry pick these things just to show you and you could find an article that says anything. But when you read through that article, the guy makes a lot of sense. In other words, like there's all this innovation going on. Yes, JavaScript or Java is the old school. It was there first, and it's been predominant in Android development. But that seemingly is going to fade towards other languages, and then Microsoft's innovation is pushing them where the new work, the new things are. What I mean, seriously, if you're starting a brand new project today, are you picking ASP or JSP? You're picking ASP. I mean, you just are. I mean, but there's some people out there that are like, okay, I know Spring MVC. I know that's what I'm going to roll with that.
Right.
But when you start looking at it,
you should start looking at where you're going to be in 5 years.
Can I build a team of 20 with that? Or can I find more 20 .NET developers out there to do that? And the answer is that you're going to find way more people interested in doing C# for that workload. Now, for Android, I think that's just going to be shifted away because that's where Google is going. That's just what they want to do. They're building their own platform, Flutter, and they get their own language behind it, Dart. So it's just what's happening.
Okay, on to our next article find here then. So this one, what I want to talk about here on this was an article just about the developers in general through the pandemic, right? So it was through kind of 2020 and what happened there. And there's a few things we saw here. So they were talking about February to March, and Dice data showing there was a 25% dip for developers during that time, for web developers. A lot of times, graphic designer style work, that front end kind of work, I think. And then it's talking about here what kind of dropped the most, and senior web developer 11%, software developer 8%. But out of all of that, it says the damage wasn't spread evenly across these, and it said the demand for .NET developers in that same time frame actually rose 12%. So it shows you even during that pandemic, the early pandemic times when it was down, .NET actually went up.
And I've got a theory on why this happened.
Okay.
Kevin, here's my
theory.
Give
it to me. What you got?
This is my theory and my hot take on this. So take this with a grain of salt. But I think what you're seeing is the enterprise companies, the larger companies that are running .NET, weren't as severely impacted by COVID as some other smaller companies that may be running some other types of projects. So like, in other words, like if you're a 10-man shop and you have a web service, a web development out there, and you're building a website that does something, and then suddenly the demand for your product falls off. Well, yeah, those guys are getting laid off. Right. But if you're Lowe's Hardware or Home Depot or somewhere like that, you
still got to keep it ticking.
Business is actually booming,
exactly, because we saw businesses that were on had an online aspect. I mean, obviously the big issue takes something like Amazon. He made billions of dollars during the pandemic. It was not a bad thing for that company. So you're right. They needed more developers. They needed to keep the developers, and you're right. They're generally using enterprise level tech like.
And I also think that, Dice is showing like raw statistics about certain job searches, but I think most of the people that were good at what they did are employed during COVID. I mean, they just were. Yeah, the current gig they may have went away, but they were working somewhere else pretty quickly after that. And now that may be not the case for everyone around the world, but in general, here in the U.S., you can see if you were a good developer, you probably had a role if you wanted it. And some people didn't want to roll, man. They took 2020 off. I mean, they took their stimulus check and they said, "Dude, I'm just going to ride this out at home. I'm done. I'm done."
That stimulus check ain't going to get you very far. For those of you that don't know, in the US, the government gave everybody some money, and it wasn't a massive amount of money. It wouldn't have got you through a year. Put it that way. It wasn't the equivalent of paying you for a job. It was, it was a few $1,000s.
So, but in general, .NET seemingly like thrived when others weren't, and so that's good. So other stacks were decreasing,
which I mean that's a good reason to go into this too, is to protect your career from things like that, from volatility like that, because this might not be the last time we go through something like this.
Exactly. Yeah.
So. Okay, moving on. We have a bunch more articles to get through. Okay, we're going to move on to Stack Overflow now. So let's talk about, we did a video the other day talking about Visual Studio on Tuesday. We did this, a cool Visual Studio walkthrough. If you haven't seen it, you can go check it out. After this, I'll put a link up here somewhere. But right now, you can check it out on our channel.
Oh, cool. We got a super chat. Yeah.
Mike Lee. Thank you for the super chat, Mike. We appreciate it. Let me pull up your comment, because it will disappear here in a second.
Yeah, I got the Han Solo one. All right, cool.
So Mike says, I think, Mike who's connected me with on LinkedIn. That's cool.
Okay, good.
It's a great content. In order to break into the industry, is important the new developers still in older versions of ASP.NET, or should we focus? I'm guessing this is going to be focused on what's new. Good question.
Here's what I think, Mike. I do think there is a lot of work in the older versions. But all the new stuff is coming out in .NET Core. Now, .NET Core has been around for a good 24 months now. So I think you'll be seeing a lot of rewrites from, I'm going to call this legacy ASP, which can be like legacy ASP, which we call it. It could be web forms. It could be ASP.NET MVC pre.NET Core. But if I had to learn something today, I'm learning .NET Core, MVC ASP.NET. So I would start on the new stuff, learning that. And then once you know that, if you get on an older job, then you can just pick it up over there. So from ASP.NET MVC to ASP.NET Core, .NET 5 right now, there are differences between them, but they're not so drastic that you won't even know what to do there's no reason at all to learn a legacy ASP, and there's really no reason to learn web forms. Most of those things are going to be rewritten. So I would focus on the new stuff now so that you're set up going forward for the next foreseeable years to come. That's what I would do.
And here you go. And Adrikac, he said, talking about web forms, he says running the same thing as Mike, because one guy in my class has a job where they're using web forms.
Yep, and you'll see that. But people that are hiring for web forms know that it's going to be increasingly hard to find web forms people, because the web forms people have moved on to the newer stuff.
That's always the case, isn't it? You see, like, somebody will come on the channel at some point, at some time, and they'll say that in a video, and they'll drop a thing that says something like, man, have you seen how much, like, assembly programmers make? And they're like, it's like $300,000. Like, yeah, dude, because there's 5 of them.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
You know, and it's the same kind of thing. You'll see an increase in, like, at some point web forms will be like kind of not in demand but high paid, because there'll be very few people doing it at a very expert level.
Yeah. And the thing is about web forms is it's deprecated. So it's not even in the new version of
Oh wow, okay.
It's gone. I mean, like, it's totally gone. So you're on the old and it's going to soonly be unsupported version of the .NET framework. It's not in that. So, like, they right now have ASP.NET Razor Pages, ASP.NET MVC, ASP.NET Web API, and ASP.NET what they're calling Blazor. So that's how they're saying pick one of these going forward. Transition your projects from web forms to one of these new technologies, and you'll see that. So, like, I would learn the new stuff right now. That stuff will go away pretty quickly. So people have to rewrite them.
So there you go. Okay, so back to our topic. We did a video on Tuesday. Again, I will link it. Where are we? Up here. When this comes after this. But we talked about Visual Studio, and you had a cool Visual Studio demo. And it's kind of an interesting thing too, talking about the tools that go along with the language and platform. And in Stack Overflow's developer survey, top 2 apps for most popular development environments: Visual Studio Code, which you can do more than C# in, but Visual Studio, 31%. Yeah. You could say that I think a lot of that development, as I think you've said before, is going to be C# development.
It's going to be C#, could be F#, could be VB, .NET, but it could be C++. But I would imagine a lot of that is, in fact, C# development.
Right.
So, but those are the 2 dominant platforms out there for writing code, which could give you some insight into, like, what people are building. Now, VS Code could be obviously very popular with the front end frameworks like JavaScript, React, and those kind of things.
Yep.
But they make the best 2 development environments, period, in the market.
There you go. And there's one other part of this too.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say there's one other part of the same.
I got some. Yeah, go ahead.
I was saying there's one other part of this same thing. Same survey. Most loved, dreaded, and wanted. And in the love section, look what was top. 77.2% .NET Core.
Yeah, and even .NET's in the middle there.
It is
the transition that's
what it does. It shows you that, like, people were like, they don't, like, hate this, but they don't. It shows you that how much better it's getting. 61% of people didn't necessarily all love this. 77% of people like .NET Core. So it shows you that it's incrementally gotten better.
Yeah, and you got Xamarin on the list, makes the list at 48%. So, like, Microsoft has positioned itself very well to do that. And all you're seeing is the .NET framework moving over to .NET Core, being open source, being cross-platform, all those kind of things. So it is much, in every way, better than the old version of .NET 4.5.
Okay.
So you get more information about what people are transitioning over to this.
Right.
They are. The industry's moving.
Okay, let's move on to our next article. Let me pull this one up here. This is on F-Blog. This is the hottest software developer skills in 2020. This one was cool.
Yeah.
If I scroll down. So this was done. So notice the countries that are listed: Estonia, Finland, Lithuania. This is from, I believe this company are actually located in Estonia. This is some other European countries talking about this.
Right.
Their top jobs, at number 6, top jobs, period, jobs in their app. So these guys make an app, right, that helps you kind of get a job, was .NET software engineer, coming in at number 6. If we scroll down a little bit, top software engineering jobs was .NET software engineer at number 1.
Right, and number 2 is full stack, which I guarantee you
is going to have some crossover. Full stack is
also including a lot of C# ASP.NET roles.
Yep.
So like,
this goes to show you that there's parts of the world, exactly, in random places in the world. I mean, this is in Estonia. Right. I have no idea what the job market looks like in Estonia, but if you're in Estonia, you should be targeting .NET.
Yeah, exactly. And I hadn't heard of Meet Frank until this morning when we did.
I hadn't either. Nope. I started looking it up, and I was like, oh, interesting. Yeah, look, they got an app, and it helps you kind of get a job. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then you're like, oh, look what their studies and stats are showing them that you should be learning.
Right. And so like that goes along with what we've been saying for years here at CoderFounder is the number one job in America, just the job itself on all jobs was full stack web dev. And so like that's the job. You should learn how to do that. And then when you say, okay, I'm going to learn full stack web dev, how do I build that site? Now I know what I want to build. How do I build it? And you start breaking it down. It's like, okay, ASP.NET makes a whole lot of sense versus other stacks out there for like just the sheer opportunity that you have.
Right. Okay. Right. Next article. I'm churning through these things so we can get to you guys' questions at the end too.
Yeah.
So this was published on C# Corner. So yes, biased in terms of it being like the kind of source, but it talks about the future of .NET. And we saw this already. This shows you sort of the roadmap. Microsoft have published this all the way out into 2023 with .NET 8. So that's very cool. But this had some other stuff in this article too, which I thought was super good. And again, we've seen this already. This kind of Unifi Platform. We've talked about this a lot. But down here we're talking about we're talking about like where you can build stuff here. So desktop, obviously web, mobile, cloud, game, machine learning, Internet of Things, and all the different opportunities that are in here. Just shows you that you can, if you move into one of these areas, you have the ability to sort of move sideways into another one of these areas.
And so while we're talking about the future, it's in preview 2 or 3. I think it's maybe 3 now, but like it may be 2. But .NET MAUI, which is what's going to be called .NET 6, is allowing you to write code that can target Mac OS and Windows Desktop from the same project, as well as iOS, Android, and probably Surface Duo if they ever release it. So, like,
actually, this thing here shows that it says it targets so .NET 5 targets platforms Windows, Linux, Internet of Things, Mac OS, iOS, Android, tvOS, watchOS, and WebAssembly.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's got you covered. I mean, we're talking about tvOS. We're talking about putting it on a.
Right. So there's some projects going on where you can like push that out there. So a lot of those things it is happening, and so like you can use this one language and this one framework. Increasingly, you write one project and you pick where you want it to run at. And so that's the goal. And .NET 6 will allow us to multi-target desktop apps, which is pretty exciting. Was before the cross-platform promise was in the web arena. So like I could take my website and push it to a Linux host, and I could take my website and push it to an ISS or a Windows host, and they'll run the same and work the same. So now we're getting that reality to desktop, run native on the desktop and the mobile devices. So it is ARM support, which is what the Microsoft has a device, a Surface Book that runs ARM, and then they also, whatever their phone, and whenever they get the Surface Duo, if that ever comes out, that's also an ARM device. So you'll be able to target those as well. Obviously, it's Microsoft's product, so it's going to work, but like it's targeting everything.
Right. Okay. One last article,
and then we'll get to some questions.
Yeah. Give us time. Okay. So this one was Forbes. So we're talking about why this whole thing, what's driving this whole thing, and it's cloud based.
Yeah. And so when you think about why would Microsoft spend this amount of money, time, and effort to produce C# Visual Studio and .NET, which are largely free. Because they're going to make sure that when you build stuff with their stuff, that it's easy to target Microsoft Azure, which they are making billions upon billions of dollars in Azure. So let's go to some of these stats here.
Yeah. So this is what I found interesting from this chart. This was kind of, it shows, so this is basically AWS versus the other cloud market, right? So that's kind of what it's showing here. So AWS sitting at just over, sitting over 30% since 2017, really, through 2020. They've really kept kind of a straight line. But look at Microsoft going from 10% up to 20% market share over that same time.
Right.
It just shows growth. Whereas the others have kind of stagnated. I mean, IBM's gone down to nothing. Google shows a little growth, but Microsoft's showing by far the most amount of growth in this section.
What's the orange line? I can't see from it.
That's Amazon. That's AWS.
What's the red one in the bottom?
The other one. I don't know what that one is, actually. Hold on, let me... I
couldn't read it.
Yeah, let me see if I can blow it up a little bit. There we go. Make it a little bit
Alibaba?
bigger. Yeah, Alibaba, yeah. Yep.
Okay, it's the Chinese cloud. Yep. So I think that and then you see the other platforms are just diving.
Right. Well, it seemed like IBM's definitely dived. Amazon, I would say, has been stagnant. They've had ups and downs, but again, about 30% market share. Microsoft's the only one that shows that level of growth for sure.
Yeah. So the dotted line shows anyone that's not mentioned. Their percentage.
These others. Others. Yeah.
Yeah, they're just diving.
Yeah.
Because Microsoft and Amazon is pushing them out of the marketplace.
Just taking that market.
And so those are your traditional, what I would call gray box vendors or rack-mounted vendors, maybe like a Rackspace or someone like that. So that we're making their own kind of clouds. So they're probably being a lot of pressure put on them by Azure. So what you're seeing is Microsoft wants to build the tools that allow you to interact with their cloud platform easier. So, and the thing that I want people to understand is, and I got a quote that I can't see past Microsoft, and I get it. I understand that maybe I'm slightly biased, but when you see graphs like that, it's not that I'm biased, stupidly biased. Okay. And
you're not unknowingly biased.
Yeah. And it's not like
bias.
They pay me to say this and I make more money if Microsoft wins. Trust me, if something else is winning, Coder Foundry would teach something else. In that regard, I'm pretty unbiased in that regard. I want to teach things that can get people a job. And so therefore, let's pick the biggest stack that we can build on. Whether it's hard to learn, easy to learn, it's irrelevant to me. Learn what will get you a job. And I think that's where education should be more focused instead of what's easiest to learn, which is what everyone says. The craziest thing I've ever seen is the syntax of language is beautiful. It's okay, so are we writing it because the syntax is beautiful, or are we writing it because 1,000 companies are using it and there's 10,000 jobs out there? And that's where I fall.
Right.
So I'm more on the pragmatic approach versus the elegant approach or the pretty approach. Having said that, the innovation and the things that Microsoft's pouring into these languages makes it elegant, makes it pretty, makes it easy to use, and makes you more profitable because now you can, a lot of companies will hire you for your skills. But when you look at the number that they're growing through Azure, they want to own that platform, period. They want to cross, and it looks like they're going to catch Amazon eventually because Amazon's relatively flat and Microsoft is growing quickly.
Exactly.
And we talked to this a little bit. A lot of people make fun of when I'll get the quote in here. Well, what about Zune? I'm like, what about Zune? It was an MP3 player, man. Microsoft in general makes things that stay dominant for years. And so you can look at the Windows market, and they have been dominant in the desktop OS space since, I don't know, the 90s. And it's not like IBM didn't make OS 2. It's not like there's been 1,000 Linux flavors out there with Red Hat and everybody else trying to make one.
Just 1,000.
Apple didn't try. I mean, they have maintained a dominance, even with their missteps with Windows 95 and Windows Me, and we were laughing at Microsoft Bob with the Clip
Clippy.
Bob.
I like him up. Clippy was his nickname. Do you know there's a whole like set of memes around Clippy too? I didn't know this.
Yeah.
There's actually, you know what? I have to link it to you guys. There's a really, really good Matrix one. There's that College Humor did, and it talks about, and it's like, you know when he's trying to bend the spoon in the Matrix, and so this takeoff is like in the Matrix, and it comes up, and the Clippy comes on the screen. It's like, looks like you're trying to bend a spoon with your mind. Do you need help? Because that's what Clippy would do, right? It would jump in and offer you help. It was the worst kind of help ever, but it's funny. So yes, they've had plenty of missteps. It used to be
the first thing you turned off. I mean, like it was like it would come up and you'd say, "Turn that off." You know, I don't want Clippy there.
Yep.
But they've managed to carve out dominant Windows OS for years, decades. They managed to, with all the competition, still remain dominant in Office. Even when Google released all their free tools and whatever with Gmail and Google Docs and all that kind of stuff, they come back and respond with Office 365 and like win. Zoom comes out in the middle of COVID, and guess what? Suddenly Skype turns into Teams, and now Teams is like competing head to head with them. And so like they have the ability to keep things in a dominant position for decades. And I think that's why I'm cautioning students like, hey man, build your career around this stuff. You can pretty much count on it. Yes, Silverlight went away, but so did plugins and Flash and everything else at the same time. It went away because they saw a better way of doing things. It doesn't mean that the language itself went away or .NET went away. It's just the way you did it changed a little bit. So
right. Here's something else too that we haven't talked about. But if you're picking between Java and Microsoft, would you look at like company valuation too in terms of like their stock? Because I thought about this too, because Microsoft stocks has done super well, right? So, and I thought like, okay, so I'll show you real quick. I pull both up here,
it could
right?
be Oracle, yeah.
So this is 5 years, right? So over 5 years, back in whenever this was, April 1, 2016, $55 a share for Microsoft. We're at 237 now. Oracle, back in that same time, they're at $41. They're now at $60, $70.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something to like look at. I would.
How much time, effort, and money is Oracle spending on like making Java relevant versus Microsoft, the investments they're making into that platform, the .NET framework? And I guarantee you, if you could really get down and look at the balance sheets of how much money's being spent on one or the other, Microsoft's they're investing way more in the .NET framework than they are in the JDK.
Right.
And it's just like, license it when you run it. You have to pay a licensing fee. It's just kind of it's kind of archaic.
Well, that's what people used to complain about Microsoft for, wasn't it? It's like, man, like the Visual Studio costs money. Like, and people even say that today. Somebody will always come on and be like, Visual Studio costs money. Yeah, when you make over $1 million with it, like.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I mean,
and VS Code is just free. I mean, so like VS Code is just free.
VS Code is just free.
And I'm just saying, if your company goes over $1 million in revenue and you're doing well, I mean, you pay for the development.
The licensing fees. I mean, and it's negligible at that point too. It's like it's nothing. It makes total sense. It's a good pricing model, I think. But that's just me.
It's a good bet. And so, like, what we're seeing is when you see the 60 from 42 to 68 and from 55 to 232, all things being equal, you're seeing the growth of cloud dominating what they're doing and how they're raising money in that. And to keep that in a dominant position, they've turned around and very smartly said, let's invest in the tooling, the languages, and everything else so that people will stay on Azure. We'll make it easier for them, make it better. And I've been saying this for 3 years, like data science is just going to get easier and easier to do because Microsoft wants it to be easy on Azure.
Right.
And guess what they're going to do? They're not going to advance Python to do that because they don't control that. They're going to advance C# to do that because that's where they can impact it the most, and that's where the market's going. So questions, Kevin, let's see what we got. Some questions out there.
Let's do some questions. I promised Antoine we would do yours first, so let's do Antoine's question first here. So he's finally catching a live stream today. Thank you for joining us. I hope you are still here. Any advice to learn C#.NET? Should I just jump into the documentation? I like your platform, can't afford to pay 2 boot camps. Found Code of Foundry too late. Oh, so he's in another boot camp, I guess.
It's in another boot camp. Here's the solution that we're coming up with. We realize that people around the world and necessarily can't afford for our live in-person instruction. And so we're releasing a self-paced course that will be affordable on a subscription basis sometime next month, we hope, in April. And so as we get closer to that, we'll do it. And it'll be the most comprehensive .NET curriculum on the market. We can safely say that.
Yep.
So
and
you see the sheer volume of information we're putting
yeah.
together, we're putting out.
Yep. And I will tease ever so slightly that the launch offer that we're probably gonna do an offer before it actually becomes out, and we're gonna talk about this a little bit more in the coming sort of weeks and months here. Will be a killer offer in terms of price.
Yeah.
And we're going to give it to you guys because you guys have sort of followed us through this and you guys have been asking about this. So you guys kind of get the exclusive on this. We'll launch it here on YouTube and we'll talk about pricing and that stuff. But we want to make it like, straight out of the gate, like super affordable for you guys in terms of
super affordable.
What we're eventually going to charge for it.
Buy it. And the other thing too is that our if you're a Coder Foundry alum, or if you're in the boot camp, you'll get the self-paced course. All you have to do is reach out to us. We'll make sure you get a license to it, and you'll be licensed to keep your skills up to date. And what we're building isn't a course; it's a curriculum and a learning platform. So, like, think of this. Ultimately, our goals are to build something akin to Pluralsight versus akin to a singular Udemy course from, name the course creator that you have. And so when we say curriculum, where to be better than like FreeCodeCamp or better than Pluralsight, is that our curriculum is designed with a goal to get you a job. So like from course 1 all the way to the end, where we're doing the advanced stuff, all of that stuff is connected together so that the things that you learn, you build upon those things, and the courses aren't in silos. So like when you go to computer science, in college, all your courses are siloed depending on what the instructor is teaching at the time. So like it doesn't matter.
Database class, and you just build a database. You never hook it to anything.
You never hook it to anything, and the database could be, SQL or Mongo or Oracle. It doesn't really matter. Whatever the instructor is choosing to teach at the time that you take it. And so your courses aren't really even curated or even remotely connected, whereas ours is going to be well thought out from course 1 all the way to the end. And it's going to be hundreds, if not thousands of hours of video and text.
Plus,
so it's going to be a lot.
Plus, there's going to be opportunities to interact as well. This is not going to be a
weekly webinars that you can just attend to, talk to the instructor, and it'll be on one of those tracks that you may be in or whatever. And you pick one of those and attend that live webinar. Chance to answer questions, watch them do it live, and interact with them. So I think it'd be really great.
It's gonna be cool. It's gonna be very cool.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take some of the parts, and maybe like we'll do a video on that. And you can see me learn it, and then that'll be kind of interesting. I think that's gonna be cool.
All right, so enough commercials. So let's
exactly. Enough about that. You guys keep asking us about it, but we are working on it, and we're way closer than we've ever been. So yeah, it's coming. Let's see. We get this question a lot, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. David's question says, any book recommendations on C#? Does it have to be the latest version of .NET?
I think so. I think that's what you should do. This stuff is changing really quick. Think about what you want to build and pick that. So like pick up an ASP.NET book, specifically on the newest version is what you want to pick up, I think, at this point, and learn full stack web dev.
Yeah, if you want to go the book route, that's kind of the way to go. We don't have a specific recommendation because they change too much.
They change really quickly.
And
so
not
look
to
at
go
something
back to
on C# 9 or ASP.NET on .NET 5 or .NET Core.
And not to go back to our course again, but I'm going to. You could say the same thing about our course, with the exception of, as soon as we put this one out, guess what we're working on next? The update to
.NET 6. Yeah, the .NET 6 course.
So it's going to be a constant thing for us now. When you buy into the course, you're going to get the latest thing as it comes out. So
yeah, and that's the difference too. Just real quickly, the reason we're doing this because we see a hole in the market, or the reason how it works. So when you go to Udemy and you're a course creator on Udemy, you push your course out. It's really hard to make updates to that thing, change it, do it, whatever.
Yeah, it's a pain.
Whereas we're going to own our own platform, and so like when the technique changes inside of how do you build websites, we're just going to update that.
And we'll record a new video and put out a new document.
It's just new now. It's just changed. So
Yep.
It's more like pushing an update through Git or whatever, so that's kind of what we're going to do.
That's it. This is somebody who's down on themselves. Let's talk about this. Esther says, do you think C# works even for a loser like me? Firstly, Esther, not a loser.
Not a loser, but yeah, it works for everyone. So you can learn it. So I personally don't believe that it's any harder to learn that versus anything else. Especially in full stack web dev, you've got to understand some concepts, and websites in general are kind of built the same way. Even when you look at React, Angular, ASP.NET, or Blazor, you have the same kind of concepts of server-side code running, either a REST or some kind of URL type that invokes your server-side code. You have a database and you have a front end. So like all of them are kind of the same. So if you consider yourself a loser, which I don't think you are, just think it's no harder to learn this versus something else. So there's no easier one to learn,
right.
So like,
right.
That's why you shouldn't, I'm going to go to Ruby because I'm a loser. No, just go to .NET and get a job and decide that you want to do this as a career and make that career switch. It may take you a year to get there. Okay. That's okay. Just start learning it and see what you can do. Yep. It's not quick though. It's not going to be 2 weeks or 7 days or learn C# in 8 hours. Which we see on the on YouTube all the time. It's like,
like learn C# in an hour. You're like, wow, that's impressive. It's like Matrix in knowledge injection style.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah, okay. I know Kung Fu.
Exactly. Let's see. Casual Data Scientist says, could you clarify the difference in job postings looking for full stack C# dev and stuff like front end C# dev?
Okay, so I can, and here's what I think you're seeing going on. Go look at what are the specific things that they're hiring in for. So typically when you say full stack C# dev, typically they're talking about ASP.NET, MVC, or Razor pages, okay? They could be talking about Blazor, but I would imagine at this point someone's gonna tag that thing as Blazor dev, all right now today. When you see front-end C# dev, typically they're mixing React, Angular, or some kind of JavaScript front-end with a web API backend. And I think that's what you're seeing. So it could be Vue, it could be React, it could be Angular, but the backend, the server-side code is running in C#. And so they're using web API typically for that, or maybe a serverless function or whatever they're doing, maybe microservices, but like typically web API controllers hooked onto a JavaScript front end. And so you'd have to know JavaScript as your primary language, but you also have to interact with web API on the server side. So I think that's what's going on there. But you can look at the technology stack they're using further on into the job description.
Yeah, you got to get down to the bullet points, right?
Yeah. So typically I think that's what's going on there.
Let's see. Retro Rob says he lives in a small community in upstate New York. Enrolled in a boot camp, is almost done. Awesome. That's very cool. Most companies here seem to want C++ developers. If I'm learning C#, will it be easier to learn C++?
You don't need to learn C++. Just stick with what you're learning right now. C#. There's more C# roles than C++ roles in New York.
I wonder what companies...
I don't even have to look.
Yeah, listen, a small. I wonder if there's maybe a large employer there that uses C++ or something like that.
Could be. It could be an engineering firm or something like that just happens to be where you're at, and you're having to see those roles. But I think you're going to be fine. And learning C++, it's a whole different animal. It's a whole different beast. If that's what you want to go, then go do that. But like, if you're in a boot camp and you're almost done and you're learning C#, learn what you've done really well, keep improving on that, build projects based on that, get a job in that, and then start learning C++. You can get a job with C# in New York, I'm sure of it. Right. I don't even have to look. I mean,
Okay. Okay, we're just a little bit after. Let's do a couple more here. Mustafa says, how can companies and developers adapt to this rapid development on this platform? Yeah, good question.
Yeah, and so what I tell every student coming in here, when you learn how to code, what you're really signing up for is a lifelong pursuit of learning. and this is going to be changing every single year. And so companies will have to stay up to date on that. That's why we're building what we're building on the self-paced course. That's why we're doing it, because when .NET 5 comes out, and then we release .NET 6 when that comes out, and release .NET 7 when that comes out. Having said that, there will be times where there's a lot of .NET 5 work, there's some new .NET 6 work. And so learning how to do it will allow you to be kind of very proficient over the years. And I do think that this is going to take leapfrog approaches. I think you'll see, like in .NET 5 was a really large web development piece. And now what you're seeing in .NET 6 is really focused on more of that unified vision across desktop and mobile, and with Xamarin and Blazor and things like that. That is going to be the primary focus of that. So if you got down to, and you worked at Microsoft, you probably see that there's going to be focuses on each release. There will always be improvements and changes and things like that. There may be a bigger focus around on .NET 5 and 6, and they have different focuses where web development may not change that much in .NET 6. So, but I don't know yet. I haven't even got into it yet because it's just coming out in previews now.
Right.
So, but yeah, it's lifelong learning and reading blogs and writing code and doing things. But like once you're in a company, though, it's a little bit different. You get a product rolled out there. You got 10,000 users on something that's written in .NET 5. Then moving to .NET 6, you have to be more careful and cautious about that. Is it going to break what we do? What do we get out of that? Those kind of things. All those considerations happen in every company. You as the developer should stay up to date by looking at new stuff.
Let's do some quick fire questions to finish out.
Okay, quick fire.
Let's do that. So Fear says ASP.NET MVC versus ASP.NET. Which one to choose?
Right now, I think it's still MVC because I think that's the design pattern more in use versus Razor pages. If you're talking about the Razor pages, or if you're talking about ASP.NET, the previous version, ASP.NET MVC on .NET 5 is far superior to that one by far. If you're talking about Razor pages, I would pick MVC right now. I think it's more flexible, more powerful than Razor pages, though you can do pretty much the same thing with either one. But if you asked me, I would pick MVC just because it's the more ingrained pattern in the industry, and more people can know that right away versus the Microsoft Razor page MVVM one.
Okay, cool. Gabriel says, thank you for the question. Been coding on a PC, but we're transferring to college soon. Should I get a Mac or PC laptop for coding if I want to do .NET but still do other languages for schoolwork?
So I'm on a Mac and I'm using Parallels for Windows, and I code on Windows on my Mac by using Parallels. That's what I do. Kind
of get the best of both, don't you? If you can afford the Mac, it is a little bit more expensive out of the gate, but you do get the best of both worlds because you can put stuff on the Mac OS side of stuff too, and you can also then run stuff on Windows. Through Parallels.
Right. But,
it's really good now.
If you're running VS Code for all your languages at schoolwork,
doesn't matter.
VS Code runs on Mac, runs on PC, runs everywhere.
Yep.
I don't know if that's a big deal, but if you're going to use Visual Studio, I think right now Visual Studio is better on Windows than it is on Mac right now. They're kind of two different products.
But the Mac hardware allows you to do both. You obviously can't do the same
now
thing.
Now that Mac hardware, Kevin, we know that Mac hardware is looking really compelling with the M1 chip. So
man, yes it is. I am salivating to get that M1X chip. I've been waiting. So my 2015 laptop is due for an update, and this is the year. When this M1X comes out, in these 16-inch ones probably, I'm all over it. I'm dying to get one.
Yeah, it just depends on money, budget, time, what you really need it for at school, why they would dictate a Mac. I'm not really sure. I don't know what would run on the Mac that you couldn't run on a PC. So it's whatever
that's
you want.
The thing. You get it's pretty much everything nowadays. But if you like the Mac OS for your regular stuff, you get the best of both. But you got to buy a Mac to do that. You can put Windows on a Mac. You can't put Mac OS on Windows on a PC. If that makes sense.
Right.
You can only
it doesn't work that way.
Exactly. Exactly. One last thing then. Esteban wants to know, thank you. Is learning Xamarin a good choice these days with all these no-code tools growing?
100%, man. And it's going to be called probably something else by the end of the year, .NET MAUI or .NET 6. But yeah, so Xamarin allows you to build things that are running native on iOS, Android, desktop for Windows, and soon to be Mac OS. So like that's where they're going with that platform, whatever they call it. I do believe they're going to change the name, but whatever they call it, that's what that's going to be able to do. We'll write C# and then compile down and run native on there. So no code tools are growing, but there is a ceiling for the types of things that you can do with those things. So that's more cookie cutter things that you can do. And it doesn't mean that you can't build things with it. It doesn't mean you can't do it. It's just that to run it natively on an Android device or iOS device, Xamarin's your only choice right now. Really, if you want something native, perform it, control everything. So, but the no code stuff's kind of cool. It's kind of interesting. But no code's been around. Everyone thinks like it's a new thing, but like it's been around for a long time, man.
It has.
With a lot of things.
The tools are just getting better with it. It's just becoming more interesting, and you can do more interesting things with it, I think.
Yeah.
That's probably why it's
you can go look at .NET Interactive. Something I was looking at this morning where you can just hook a SQL server to it or any kind of SQL device, and then boom, you got a little app there. You can filter and look at data and stuff like that.
That's cool.
But you're never going to build, say, a DoorDash competitor with it.
Right. But
if you need to throw
throw a simple CRUD app together for something that you're going to use yourself, then have at it.
Yeah. And then the problem with no code is you build something for the business units real quickly, and they say, "Hey, we just need a simple app to track inventory," and you crank something out with no code, and they're like, "Oh yeah, but can it do this?" And they have a feature list.
Yeah. All of a sudden, you deliver this one thing, and they're like, "Can we make this do this?" And they're like, "Actually, no, you can't."
You said you wanted a simple app, not Salesforce.
Right. All of a sudden, you're making your own internal Salesforce. Which, if you've ever looked at Salesforce, anybody, it's the most complex application on the market. Like, it's so confusing. There's a reason that Salesforce developers get paid a fortune.
Yeah, so it's right tool, right job always. I think no code will have its place, but it's never going to replace custom development because they're always the features get too crazy and you just can't. You'd end up working around the tooling more than just coding it up. So it's always going to be a place for coders.
Okay, let's wrap this up. Cool. We're going to be back on Tuesday for another one of these. I don't know what topic we're going to do yet, but something interesting. Anybody has an idea, drop me a message. I saw a bunch of you guys connect with us on LinkedIn, so that's cool. I will look at those and accept those here right after this. I will also put a link in the description down below here shortly to all of the documents we used today, or all of the websites we went to, all of the sources. Oh, which, by the way, Quix did point out that there was a new developer survey, by the way, for 2020 for Stack Overflow. And look, just to show you the same thing again, really, ASP.NET Core, still the most loved one in here, and .NET Core. So nothing changed between those 2 years, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's just dominant. And then when you see React in there, number 2. There's I bet you it's split between React Node, React a Web API too as well. So like, it's even that. It's like React is kind of fragmented.
Yeah, it's like what we're talking about. It's fragmentation across all this stuff. It's difficult to put them in buckets sometimes. It just is.
Yeah. Main thing is you're going to have a job if you know .NET and C#. You probably will have a job if you know React. I think Java's on the decline. But even in the foreseeable future, like 3 to 5 year outlook, I mean, you're gonna have a gig in Java probably. But if you're learning today, man, just trust me when I say this. This is the one that you can like make your bet on. Just learn it.
That's it. .NET to the moon, diamond hands.
Yeah, .NET to the moon, baby.